Hello, I'm Jason Lorraine, AVP of Strategy here at JETNET. JETNET's mission is to collect aviation data globally, make it easily accessible, usable, and valuable across every segment of aviation. During this 45-minute fireside chat, we'll explore how artificial intelligence is transforming business aviation, from operational efficiency, personal productivity. Emily Deaton, CEO of jetAVIVA and a recognized leader in business aviation, is here to share her insights not only on the AI application, some industry trends, and how to balance that innovation with human touch. This discussion will be very high level, focusing on some strategic impacts of AI in aviation, some ethical considerations, and some real world use cases. We'll also include a few interactive segments. Before we dive in, for our data lovers out there, preparing for this episode requires some coordination using approximately 12,000 tokens of some sort of AI. That's encompassing from research, Teams calls, note taking, GPT, Copilot Magic. That's all less than, a 10-watt light bulb running for a couple hours, but it saved us more than 20 hours of manual work. That's efficiency. Now, just a little housekeeping before we begin. I ask you to put any questions into the Q&A section at the top of the Teams meeting. Now let's get into it. Emily, good morning. You've led one of the largest private jet sales organizations since 2022. Before we dive into AI, could you give the audience just a brief, quick overview of your journey in aviation and what jetAVIVA does?
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning as well. Thank you for having me, and hello to everybody that's joining. It's great to see so many people that are interested in this topic. I started my career in business aviation with Embraer Executive Jet in late 2011. And I worked in sales operations, business development, CRM strategy, and customer experience. I also led and supported several innovation initiatives during my time there, working very closely with the JETNET team at the time. In 2019, I joined jetAVIVA as Vice President of Sales. Then I took over as COO in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic, which was awesome, and then assumed the role of CEO in 2022. So for those that don't know jetAVIVA, we are an IATA accredited dealer and one of the industry's largest sales and acquisition firms based on the volume of transactions that we conduct annually. And I would also like to add that a lot of my career has been in project management, operations, process improvement, and using data to drive strategy, which will sort of underpin a lot of the conversation today. But I am in no way an expert in artificial intelligence, but I would say that I am very much a current student of it. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, that's awesome. I understand your first aviation experience was kind of by accident. What hooked you in and kept you here?
Well, yes, I had no grand plans to work in business aviation. I did find myself here a bit incidentally. My first experience was an exciting one. It was my interview for my first job at Embraer was at the ribbon cutting for their delivery center that they were just opening in Melbourne, Florida. And it was, I would say, the glitz and glamour that hooked me, that got me in. I was so impressed by the presentation and the energy and the buzz, and of course, the beautiful aircraft, and all of these things were very, very exciting to me coming from out of industry. As far as what kept me here, that's easy. It was the people that kept me here. Someone once described this as a passion industry, and that really resonates with me. I love being surrounded by a team in an industry that is passionate about what they do. This is also an industry that's committed to its long-term success and ongoing development and bringing new people into the space. And there's a sense of community in this industry that I think is very rare. And that's absolutely what keeps me here and appeals to me the most.
That's awesome. AI is a conversation right now, whether it's co-pilots or coding buddies, in business aviation, it's picking up steam. I see it every day. Emily, what drew you into the AI conversation and why now?
Well, I would say it's kind of been like a two-phase process for me up until this point, right? So I would say initially, the first phase was predicated by need. We're a fast-growing company. We maintain a very high output. We're high volume. I am constantly striving for excellence in everything that we do. And I was finding capacity constraints. I was looking for ways to be more effective, more efficient, increase our capacity quickly. And AI and a lot of the applications that we'll touch on today offered an answer. And that sort of got me to dip my toe in the water and start to figure out what this could look like. For me personally, I would say that would be round one. That was phase one for me. Phase two, I mean, for that, you can thank our very visionary and forward thinking founder for. He very rightly insisted that this will be a priority for our firm. He established a clear direction in that way. And so we want to incorporate artificial intelligence into our day to day. And he directed me to really challenge myself to immerse myself in this topic and continue to learn and define how this will change the way that we operate the business. So that's why now, and I would say why at the level with which we're taking this seriously. So here we are.
Awesome. Now, your team was recently at the CALS event out in Boston. What was the general vibe from the corporate flight departments around AI? Are people curious? Are they confused, intimidated?
Yes, we did have the chance to participate in that event. It's a great event, and it does facilitate some great conversations. And one of the topics that we wanted to explore more with the group there was around artificial intelligence and applications in business aviation. And I would say that their response was similar to a lot of the responses that you get on this topic. I don't know that I would say it's unique to the CFD population, but it is a hot topic right now. And generally speaking, I think there's a high level of awareness and in some cases excitement, but there's also an undercurrent of apprehension and I would say overwhelm that you get from people on the topic. And I would say so a bit divisive, frankly. I think when you are speaking to the room, you're getting all kinds of different reactions to it. And it feels that in this early stage, that's the thing I'm feeling most consistently.
So is it like hesitation or is it just the fear of change and not knowing? What is the impetus there?
Yeah, I think, look, and I can relate to this 100%, right? So as someone who is very much on this learning journey, it can be incredibly overwhelming, right? So I think that will drive any sense of hesitation that you may pick up on. The volume of information is incredibly vast. It's rapidly evolving. You think you learn something, right? You think you start to wrap your brain around one of these topics, and there's a new announcement or an iteration that afternoon, right? It's moving really quickly. And I think sometimes it's easy to understand AI in a general sense or have an awareness of a number of the tools or the agents and the platforms that exist. But that's a very far cry from knowing how to then implement that into your business. And so, in instances where there's simply too much information, it can easily get pushed to the back burner. And I think that's a challenge that we all face as leaders, which is how do we prioritize this type of work and integrate it into the day-to-day responsibilities that we already have? And many of us are working at a very high level of capacity already. Another thing that I would say I pick up on and completely understand is that in some cases, there are some generational differences here. So there are those that may be kind of later stage in their careers that feel that this is going to be a challenge or opportunity, if you will, for someone else to deal with. And so that also is creating a little bit of a feeling of distancing themselves from the topic, like, I'm just going to let someone else deal with that down the road, and I'm going to keep focusing on what I need to focus on today, with which there are a tremendous number of priorities, right? So I would say any sense of hesitation that you pick up on or feel is really not a product of the usefulness or lack of usefulness of the tools themselves. It's more of a challenge as leaders on making the appropriate amount of time and space to really learn about this and then incorporate it properly into the business.
That's great. As I watch our audience and their AI note takers take in, I can see the different plethora of AI note takers out there. But let's kind of switch the topic to, operational. When we talk about operational readiness, what does an organization need in place before, layering on AI on top of it? Because let's face it, if you bring AI into a broken process, how do you layer that on top of that without breaking it even further?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, right? So at the end of the day, this is always about how do we make this thing work and how do we make it work effectively? I think it might be useful to take a step back and clarify what I am hoping in straightforward terms is a good way to start thinking about AI. So again, if you're coming at this from the beginning, from the kick, it's nice to frame your thinking about what you're thinking about. To me, starting out, I think it can be impactful to think about AI as an enhancement, right? So you're thinking more efficient, more accuracy, time saving, productivity improvement. And in order to understand where your processes can be enhanced, you need to have defined processes. So then you can understand where your gaps are and where your opportunities for those increased efficiencies and enhancements might be. And I know a number of organizations, and I'm sure you do as well, Jason, that have been working with a process improvement mindset for decades. And I think that this is a great position to be in because AI implementation complements a continuous improvement methodology really nicely. But if you lack that strong operational foundation, to your point, it is going to be more difficult, I think, to define the right strategy for implementation, but it's not impossible. And I would also maybe challenge one of the things you said just slightly. AI can probably help you map and fix your processes and offer suggestions on improving with the right prompting. So it is a really powerful tool, but contextually knowing how you're going to define the right strategy to implement it and having a very strong operational foundation to begin from is only going to make this easier.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. You know, we had a discussion here in-house with the leadership team, and it was about just creating the prompts and how to understand those prompts. You know, it's a whole new world. You know, when you think about this from, a leadership standpoint, delegating AI, if you have no real strategy, it just becomes another abandoned tool. I'm thinking, what are your takes on building a real AI culture and not just playing and dabbling in it?
Yeah, and I think both are important, right? I think from a learning standpoint, playing around with it can be incredibly valuable. And I think we'll touch on that a little bit more later. But if you think about real broad scale implementation at the organizational level, I would say one of the most common situations I'm seeing today is the tools that are getting thrown at you. And I expect that it's going to get worse, right? So you're the minute you start digging into this more, what I've found, like any kind of online marketing platform, is the more I start to look, the more I'm going to find. So now I'm getting advertisements and influenced and on my social media feed, all of these different AI tools and solutions and assistants and note takers and blah, 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 right? It's just constantly coming at you. So in the absence of strategy, we start trying everything, right? Well, I'm going to try this. Let me add that on. That sounds amazing. I'm going to sign up for that free trial, but then it starts charging me in 7 days. And adoption is typically pretty low in those environments because you're asking for a lot of change really rapidly without a clear understanding of what the impact of that investment of time and energy to learn something new is going to be. So you have low adoption, your costs start to compound, and ultimately those get abandoned in favor of everyone's favorite, which is I'll just do it the way I've always done it, right? That works for me. It's easier to just be consistent and we'll pick this up another time. So I would say as leaders, this is very, very critical. The direction must be clear, right? We need to know the heading. The strategy must be defined. And with any new process change, like any process change, whether it's AI related or not, the implementation, the rollout, and the training are as critical as the AI tool itself. So if you do that thoughtfully, you will see, I think, real scalable adoption, but that takes time and that takes focus and that takes follow through. So I think looking at this as more of a process change with the tool complementing it and not as just a series of tools that you're just tacking on and hoping for the best is where you're going to see that longer term return on your investment.
So it's a human factor, it's the tools, and then putting that whole package together and being able to use it efficiently and knowing when to use it is probably one of the most important parts to consider as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. When we talk about application, how we use an AI, where are you seeing AI make a tangible difference in business aviation?
I mean, this is like the broad question, right? I would say it's showing up in probably every segment of our industry in some capacity. And even if you don't see it on the surface, there is probably an AI integration that's occurring behind the scenes. And And I would imagine that's only going to continue to ramp up, right? So early stage adoption is happening, some later stage things, projects that have been in place for probably the better part of the last 10 years. If you go back to looking at kind of early data analytics and predictive analytics and those kinds of things, those have been in work for a while. So my background being in sales, research, marketing, and operations, the things that I'm the most familiar with and that I'm seeing make more of a real impact in our day-to-day is things like valuation accuracy, pricing models, video production, market forecasting, process optimization, content generation. I mean, these are the things that we're using on a daily basis. This is fully integrated into our methodology today. And I still feel like we're at the tip of the iceberg, right? So I think we're only scratching the surface on what the capacity is to use these tools and these platforms. But there's a lot happening across the industry when you think about fleet optimization, trip optimization, crew management, fuel efficiency, route planning, supply chain. I mean, to be honest, if there's something we're doing as an industry, there is likely an AI use case that can be applied to it. Because what we're talking about here is not changing dramatically everything that we do, but looking at what we do through the lens of how can I do it more efficiently and more effectively? And AI is a really good tool in enabling us to do that. So I think you're not only seeing it almost everywhere, I think you're going to continue to see it as capability increases in a lot of different places.
Now, I constantly see announcements by businesses in our sector, as well as outside of our sector, with, enhanced efficiency with AI scheduling, pricing models. You mentioned video automation. Those are all use cases that we're using every single day. One thing that we really have to lean into is, where are we going with this? What is going to be the pointy end of the spear? When we talk about like predictive maintenance, for me personally, I see that as, one of the most commercially viable use cases for AI, right off the bat. Is private aviation getting into that? Because I see it on the commercial aviation side, but I'm not really seeing it so much on the business aviation side.
I mean, I would say yes. I mean, it's coming. If you're not seeing it broadly marketed on a forward-facing capacity, I would say it's still being explored and likely being implemented in trial formats. There were projects that I was personally aware of that go back to predictive maintenance in business aviation as early as 2017, if not sooner. So again, like this has been in the works. And I would imagine with the enhanced capabilities that are out there today, that this is very much on the radar for business aviation. One of the things that I think is so cool about our industry, and I think JETNET can fully understand this, is that we have a lot of data in our industry. We're highly data oriented, and LLMs, data science, predictive analytics, it all performs better with more information. The better and more robust information that you feed into these platforms, the better output that you're going to get. And we have a lot to feed into these applications. So as an industry, I feel like we're very well positioned in the sense to take advantage of these types of solutions in the future. So if you're, again, like I said, if you're not necessarily seeing it outwardly today, I expect that's going to happen pretty soon.
Yeah. JETNET, always a leader in business aviation. We have mountains of data historically going back many decades. And this is a common problem that we have these piles of data. How do we structure this data, put it together, and then essentially put a large language model over the top of it, and then be able to ask it those questions. For us, that is something that we're tackling currently right now, playing with. It is an enormous value to our customers. We could see the value down the road. From your standpoint, from sales and customer intelligence, do you see AI tools actually helping you as a broker, spot rated upgrade owners, or tailor outreach, or figure out what aircraft they're going to predictively go into next, or what their predictive usage of an aircraft is over time?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely do. And you know this because you've been supporting us on this journey for a long time. But one of the earliest projects that we undertook in this kind of AI world was related to predicting transition timing and upgrade path based on historical data, right? So you've got all this historical transaction data thanks to JETNET. And So now you not only know how individual clients have behaved historically, but you also know how other owners within that make model category typically tend to behave and how the industry or the segment as a whole behaves. And now, as capabilities are enhancing, you can start to layer that data. So as you said, you're stacking your information now. So you can lay a large language learning model or whatever it is, an LLM on top of that, and you can start to think about market factors and adjusting for those. And then you can start forecasting, and you can start to gather some really good intelligence on that enables you to take this whole population of people that might purchase an airplane and whittle that down into who is more likely to do something and when, and what is it that they're going to do. Is it perfect? No, probably not. But let's say I can narrow this down from feeling like I'm fishing in the ocean with a fishing pole to dropping a net in a stream. Like, my odds are getting much better, right? So I think these are very real use cases. I think, again, there's lots of ways then to complement that with marketing strategy and having timely messaging. And yeah, now we're starting to really see some increased effectiveness there. And for us in our world, yeah, does that help us target new clients? Absolutely. But does it help our existing clients sell their aircraft that we're representing faster? Yes. And so now this is a value proposition that doesn't just help JETAVIVA, but it helps our clients, and that can be really powerful.
Yeah, it's a great point. Just yesterday, I had a client reach out, and they were looking for something very specific. They were looking for a Gulfstream with a certain gross weight mod, but it had to be for sale. And in this case, it had to been sometime based in Europe for some sort of mod on the aircraft. Yeah, certainly I could go through and look at every single Gulfstream that's for sale and look at their history and see if they're ever registered in a European nation. But in this case, I'm like, why am I spending all of that time and energy going and manually looking for that? I could just ask that question to our internal AI and it spit back an answer. And naturally, you have to verify that to make sure that it is truly the answer. But it did that in a matter of a minute versus it would have taken me 20, 30 minutes to go through and manually look at that.
Right.
That kind of brings
And
us into.
I think important to note, it would have taken you 20 to 30 minutes, but the average person probably quite a bit longer. So that's a great example. And I think you're right. I mean, yes, there's always sort of that. I love the little disclaimer you throw on there, like check the output for accuracy. Yes, 100%. But think from a time saving perspective, the amount of time it took you to check the response versus going out and collecting that information on the front end. I mean, it's a huge value add. It's a great example.
Well, and that kind of ties in like the human element because we've all played with GPTs and the Claudes of the world. They're great, but they also have some anomalies and some artifacts that they'll spit out that just don't jive with what really happened. So that's one of those things we have to look into. And especially with business aviation, we're dealing with very high net worth individuals, private transactions. How do we keep AI ethical and private in that kind of environment?
Well, I mean, this is the question, right? And I think this will be a fundamental challenge for artificial intelligence across all industries, ours included. And I have a feeling that the pendulum on this policy is going to swing, right? I mean, there was an article I read this morning about administrative policy from the president or in regards to how AI is going to be regulated in this country. So this is not just a business aviation challenge. This is something that we should all be looking at and mindful of. But I hope we land on a balanced approach, right? Because in my mind, risk is inherent in change. So we know we're trying something new in a lot of these instances. And if there's too much red tape in place, innovation is going to be very hard, if not impossible. But I would also say this goes back to having a really clear strategy for your use so that you can proactively put the right protections in place. And I'll use JETAVIVA as an example here, and not to say that we're perfect, but just to give a little color as to how we're thinking about this particular challenge. Before we started any broad use case applications here, we first and foremost adjusted our employee guidelines to incorporate an ethical use of AI section. Now, does that mean everything's going to be then perfect because I put it in a handbook? Absolutely not. But it was important to me that we establish an early foundation to communicate from, understanding there need to be some guardrails in place, that we won't compromise our established ethical guidelines for any of our transactions or any of our data, and that we move forward with that context in mind. So in my mind, when you think about how to do this ethically. It's very important that you're not reacting to a problem, that you're approaching it proactively. So again, strategy first, execution second, and compliance always. It has to underpin this. But I would also suggest too that it shouldn't prevent change, right? Like try to do it ethically and within these guidelines, but no, you're probably not going to get it perfect. So have protections in place, but still try. I worry that if we become too worried about the risk, we won't try at all as an industry. And if we aren't worried about it at all, things are going to get wild. So somewhere in the middle feels like the sweet spot.
Yeah. You'd mentioned earlier that, aviation is a people first industry. You and I know that all too well. With all these tools, how do we bring the trust and expertise and balance and that human touch that I think that AI needs? Because to me, that human touch is the biggest cog in this whole puzzle that we're putting together. We can have the best tools and the best applications out there, but that human interaction is key and paramount.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I would say one of the kind of off the cuff responses that you get when you start talking about AI is that it's like it's coming for all of our jobs, right? It's just going to replace us all and we're going to automate everything. And I don't agree with that. I really don't. I think humans are at the heart of this conversation. The way we are approaching this technology is to make our people better, right? Take tasks off of our plate that aren't the best use of our time, that can be done more efficiently and perhaps more accurately with an AI application, so that my team, in this example, can really focus on the human work that only they can do, right? There are things that they do incredibly well. They aren't able to do it as well if they're focused on a bunch of minutia and repeatable and automatable tasks, right? So think of it again as, how does this make your existing personnel better, and not think of it from the standpoint of like, how do I just reduce my workforce? Because I don't necessarily think that that's the right headset to approach this with. Well implemented technology requires really great people talent, right? Having the right people on your team that understand how to integrate this into your systems and then how to roll it out, how to train it, how to monitor it. That's a people job, right? That requires the right kind of talent on your team. And it also is going to enable the success of the broader team. So to me, this is only possible with the right people and for the benefit of our people. You said earlier that AI can't fix bad processes. I would argue that AI can't fix a bad employee, but it can absolutely level up a good one.
Yeah. I look at AI as a force multiplier and an efficiency engine. It makes life easier, it makes life faster, and makes life smoother. You know, Getting a little personal, are you using AI in your day to day? Be it professionally at home, or booking tickets, whatever it may be. Any favorite tool you're using? Surprising wins?
Yes. Let's see. There's a lot out there, and so in order for me to learn, I've been trying a bunch of different stuff. Some of it for more personal use, just again from a comfort level, or some for work. I was trying to think about this question honestly and prepping for this, and there's so many things that came to mind, and I didn't want to eat the entire webinar on this topic, but I'll give you a couple. I know that you love Replit, and I do too. So I did want to bring that up, but honestly, I'm going to let you share more about that. I think that's a bit more in your wheelhouse. If you're not familiar with Replit, what I love about that is it is able to take someone like me. I am not a coding savvy person. This is not a language that I speak. And I was able to build a web-based application in minutes to solve a real problem challenge that I had at work. And that was wild to me. I was very excited about the ability to do that. And that was very cool. And of course, I'm using AI to teach me AI, which was another kind of, inception moment. But I will definitely be using that one more in the future. I'm going to give you guys an easy one. This is my current favorite easy tool. And I know you mentioned that a lot of people are using AI note takers on this call, and I kind of chuckled. So I use a tool called Granola. I've started using it within the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It is a note taker. It does run behind the scenes, so you would never know that it was running when you join a call, which, I know everybody loves when their note taker joins the call. It works across platforms. So whether you're on Teams or Zoom or Google Meet, it works with all of those. But the really cool thing about it is it's conversational. So at the end of my day, let's say I've been on back-to-back Zoom calls all day. I've got all of my notes from my AI note taker. I can query that note taker and ask it, like, what are the to-dos that I committed to for tomorrow with my team, or what needs to be top of my priority list? And it'll review all of my meeting notes and it will spit that back out to me. And that's just incredibly powerful. So for someone who lives on conference calls like me, which is sad to say, but very true, that's been a big game changer for me. But no, I mean, I have a ton of examples like this, like big wins. One time I had to do a business plan analysis, and it was a very complex business plan. It hadn't been presented very well, and I was trying to ascertain if this was something we should really be exploring. And I had ChatGPT help me analyze that and model out different profitability scenarios. And I took what would probably have been a multi-day complex exercise and was able to knock it out in half an hour to find out that, in fact, it wasn't something that we were interested in exploring and moving forward with. That was an early win for me that I think really opened my eyes to thinking about the platform differently, right? I've seen a meme floating around that says, you know, while your generation is using ChatGPT like a Google search engine, there's a teenager out there creating a new business plan with it. And I think that that's so accurate, to think about the power of the tool and not diminishing it into something that is easy and great and probably adding value, but really open your aperture a bit and think about how you could be using it to tremendously add value to your day.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned Replit. I'm a believer. You know, taking what you, and again, I'm not a coder. I'm just dangerous enough to play with it. But to take an AI agent and basically tell it what I'd like to build, and then say, I'd like to hook it up to, you know, the JETNET API, and I'd like to be able to pull this information, and then I want to run it through a model context protocol and spit out a result for me. And it does it. It's just unbelievable what you can accomplish. What you couldn't do 6 months ago, 3 months ago for that matter. And now it's anybody can get up there and build out whatever you're looking for, you know,
Yeah.
whether it be for personal, you know, I do it for my personal life too, you know, going on vacation, and I built an app just for the vacation. Why not? It's easy to do.
Why
it,
not?
right?
That's really cool. That's super fun.
You know, with me tinkering around with the vibe coding, you know, using AI, you know, it really blew my mind how fast you could think of something, put it in writing, and then visualize it. You know, how do you bring those tools to market? And have you used any tools that have just fallen flat and not worked and said, oh, that was a good experiment, but let's move on?
Absolutely. And, you know, I was thinking about this too. I would suggest that the tools that didn't work, or the things that fell flat or that didn't get picked up, and I know I touched on this a little bit earlier, I think that is less to do with the tool, and it had a lot more to do with how we or I utilized it, right? How did I prompt it? What did I ask it to do? How did I build it out? Did I do that correctly? Was it well implemented? Was it well trained? A lot of the times that's where the failure stemmed from. The tool itself is simply just a tool, and it probably works perfectly fine. Was it the right tool for that solution? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it was the right tool, but it was poorly implemented. I think I'm going to continue to do that. But, you know, we learn from that. We adapt. We try to get more strategic and better as we move forward, and we go again. I mean, this is very much the season that we're in with this, because it is evolving so rapidly. But you touched on prompting earlier, and I want to dig into that a little bit because I think it's so critical, right? At the end of the day, and this is where the human element is so critical, the tool just exists. How you use it, what you ask it to do, the information that you feed it, and how you refine that, that's where the value is really stemming from. So if you're working with a tool and it's failing, I would really encourage you to take a step back and ask a lot of second level questions before you assume that it was the tool itself that isn't the right fit. Because a lot of these platforms are just so capable these days.
Great point. You know, how are you learning how to use the tools? Are you using AI to learn how to use AI?
Yeah, a lot of the time, absolutely. There's so much information out there. Now, this is where it can get overwhelming, right? I mean, because too much information sometimes just causes analysis paralysis, and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do. But yes, you can use AI to teach you about AI. There are a lot of people that are specializing in this, and they are. I'll give you an example. Like, go on X. I still want to call it Twitter. I'm dating myself. Go on X and start looking up people that are essentially building entire brands around being a thought leader in this topic, and they are creating ways to learn this in digestible and absorbable formats, right? Like maybe it's a daily newsletter update, or maybe it's a podcast once a week, or maybe whatever learning style works best for you. There's a ton of information out there. It is really good to start to dig into it, because what you'll find is, and I think I shared this with you when we were prepping for this the other day, there's probably a tool that will solve your problem, but having a better awareness of what the capabilities are will help you ask better questions when you're looking at the gaps in your process and you're defining that strategy. So I think having a really good awareness of the options that are out there is great. And then when you think you see one that might be a good fit for you, that's when I would encourage you to really dive in and go deep with it. But if you try to go deep with everything, it's just, you feel like you're drowning a little bit. So start small, get a good level of awareness, and then kind of dig in where you need to.
Yeah. Personally, I find experimenting and just playing around, I learn a lot. One of the tips or tricks that I've learned is, especially using Replit, is I'll create my prompt actually in Claude and then bring it over to GPT to tighten it up, and then bring it over to Replit to build it out. Do you ever see yourself doing that, of using tools and figuring out that this one does things a certain way, or maybe does it better the way that more of the way that I'm thinking about having it do it, and then using those as a chain of not just we're just going to GPT and using it, but we're going to using Claude because it's really good at understanding how programs work and structuring that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, has to work for you. At the end of the day, you're not going to completely redefine your learning style or the way that you like to work, right? So I'm a GETMO girl. Everyone on my team knows this. GETMO is an acronym that we use that means good enough to move on. Because again, like at some point we must advance, right? So am I likely going to go to Claude and do that and then move it into GPT and then take it into, no, I'm probably not, honestly. Like for me, I find that I'm more effective in using what works. If GPT is working for me, I'm probably going to stay there. Now, what you're saying is absolutely robust and a great methodology, but I would encourage people, especially starting out, to not worry so much about using the perfect tool for the perfect solution. But to your point, start and try and play around with it and see what works for you and get comfortable. And then think about, if you want to level up, if you have the capacity for that, if that will add value by trying to complement and stack some of those platforms. So yeah, I mean, again, I think it has to work for you, but no, I'm not exactly doing that.
Right. With your leadership role at JETAVIVA, how do you keep ahead of the curve and, using AI effectively, and as it keeps evolving, every day there's a new feature out. How do you keep up with that?
I mean, it's hard, right? I would say trying to feel like you're ahead of the curve almost feels impossible at this stage with the level of investment. But I would just say this: I'm committed to giving it my time and attention. I'm committed to continuing to try to learn, to keep implementing, and to keep iterating the implementations that we've put in place. So ahead of the curve seems a little generous. I think it's easy to feel like you're always playing catch up in this space, but I just try to remind myself when I start to feel overwhelmed or behind the curve, or that we're going to miss the mark, that at the end of the day, progress is important here, however small. It's important to start, and it's important to try to keep moving forward. And that's really the commitment that I've made for myself to the organization.
Speaking of that time commitment, how much time are you committing to this, like on a weekly basis?
A fairly good amount. And in fact, I've made some accommodations internally in regards to our leadership structure to increase my capacity to spend time on this. It is that important, and I think it is absolutely worth it. I mean, if you look ahead to the next 5 to 10 years in our industry, I think this is going to be a fundamental component of how we go to market and how we do business. And so the best thing I can do right now is give it my time.
Let's lighten things up a little bit. Some more rapid fire questions. And, first thing that pops in your head,
Okay.
What's one tech tool that you can't live without right now?
Oh, ChatGPT for me.
All right.
Like my go-to daily assistant.
Is there any business aviation leaders out there who inspire you with their tech forward thinking?
Yes, and this is going to sound like a total suck up response, but it's 100% true. I'm going to say Cyrus Sagari on this one. And if you haven't read the Moving World Report, read it, and then you can challenge my answer if you have a better one.
Challenge accepted. What's one task that you would readily hand over to AI forever, not think about ever again?
Expense reports.
All right. Yeah, that would be in my top 10. Yep, that would be a good one. Do you have any non-aviation hobbies that you love?
Love, yes. I'm really trying as a student of AI. I'm also a student of golf these days. So I would say, depending on how well I'm playing at any given moment, love it, love to hate it, somewhere in there. But right now, I would say I'm playing a lot of golf.
Emily's a scratch golfer I didn't know about. Awesome.
No, that's not what I said. Let's make sure we get the right takeaway there. Learning, I'm learning.
For some of the aviation leaders that are listening in, what's one action they can take, this week to embrace AI in their business?
I think this is such a good question because starting is hard in this environment. And I felt the very, very same way. I got a couple of things here. So I don't know if I can get you to one action, but I'm going to give you a few. I would say one, resist the temptation to delegate this. I get it. I get why it's tempting. I get why it feels like this should be something that could be solved by a department within your organization that is better understands technology or process improvement or the like. But in order to provide the right strategic direction, I think as leaders, we need to understand these solutions really well. We need to understand their potential and be comfortable with them enough to support the kind of change that's coming, right? Am I going to be involved in every single implementation and ultimate execution of it? No, but I want to be there to back the change that is going to be required and with a really good rationale for the investment of the time and energy that the organization is going to make. So I would start by resisting putting it off. And then if you're on board, then I think you start learning, right? Like start diving in, whether that's trying things out, like you said, or listening to a podcast or reading an article or, finding ways to just get more comfortable with the terminology, the topics, the options, the tools. And you don't have to spend a lot of time at the beginning, but just start somewhere. That would be, it seems simple, but it's probably the hardest advice because I am asking a lot of busy people to do something new. And then I would say, try something out. So one of the things I thought about last night was I went into one of the large language models and I said, just ask it, what is one AI tool that's easy for beginners, but will make a big impact? Here's what I do for work, blah, blah, blah. What am I missing out on if I'm not using it? See what it spits out at you and then try something. Maybe it's in your personal life, maybe it's in your work life. But to your point earlier, Jason, I think just dipping your toe in the water and starting with some of these easier to implement, no technology required solutions is a great way to get started.
Yeah. Awesome. We're going to switch it over. We got some questions and answer or a Q&A that folks have been putting in. So I'm just going to go through and ask or answer some of those. One of the ones that I can answer right off the bat, what's JETNET's plans for AI and how it applies to its customers? We're not sitting on our laurels. We're actively leaning in on this. We're getting smarter, faster. We're adapting to the technology that's coming in. And our hopes is in the very near future, we're going to be able to give our users that customizable AI that they're looking for, be it a large language model of asking a question or just being able to access the data more seamlessly without having to do a basic search. So that, that's very much on the forefront here at JETNET. We're actively working on that, myself included. So I've seen it. I've shared an example here of what the power it offers. So it's coming no timeline, but it is coming for sure. One of the questions that mentioned is that we both mentioned that information overload. The question is, how should an organization ask themselves to determine which AI solution is best for their needs?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a kind of at the heart of why people are having a hard time getting started. I would suggest, I've seen a couple of different guidances on this, and I'm sure there are probably more. One of the things I've seen is looking for redundancies, like what is something that you're doing that just takes too much time? It takes too much time away from your team on a consistent and regular basis. And then trying to understand if there would be a way, hypothetically, to automate that, what could that look like? And then again, use the AI to help you use the AI, right? Nobody has all of the answers here, generally speaking, but a lot of this is just asking the right questions. And so my guidance would be, take a look at your processes, look for areas that are just really eating up too much manual time investment. Think about if there's a potential way to automate, and then just start asking good questions. And then that's going to open up, again, kind of another layer of what potential tools could look like, and you can start to deep dive from there. But I would start just by looking for redundancy, lack of efficiency, and those kinds of things that just, when you look at your team and they really just hate doing it, it's always a bit of a problem. That's generally where your low-hanging fruit is going to be.
Yeah, you worked with me long enough that you know that when I jump on a call, I'm always looking for those efficiencies, something that you're spending an enormous amount of time. And that's one of the ways that I've changed my thinking of, it's not only just understanding what the problem is, but then looking at the tools that you can put or use to make that, solution more efficient. Time is the one resource that we can never get back. And if you can save people time, it makes the world go around a lot better. One of the common questions that I'm seeing here, comes to security. What you put in AI, and how do you guarantee the confidentiality of what you're being in is not going to be violated? Here at JETNET, we have our own internal AI that's not accessible from the general public. So it's our own walled off garden that we feel very confident that it's going to be maintained safely. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, very much the same way. To me, this is kind of a data in, data out conversation. And yes, there are ways to protect your information and keep it internal. So there are general open platforms, like free versions of things you can go use. That's going to be a bit more open source data in, which means you're going to get open source data back out, being really mindful about what you put into something like that. But there are, to Jason's point, ways to protect things and internalize them and put some guardrails and barriers in place so that the information comes internal, remains internal, and isn't available to be accessed externally. And those are really good things to, again, learn and understand, and again, ask about when you're at that implementation phase.
I see Bill Ostrova has got a great question. What are some areas of strengths for AI, and what about the areas of weaknesses? I can kick that off. So one of the areas of strengths for AI is just the efficiency and time. But one of the weaknesses I personally find is I can ask the same question to the same AI model 2 times and get 2 slightly different answers. Do you have any problems? Do you run into that as well?
Yes, I definitely run into that. And I think this is where prompting is so important, and the conversational aspect of a lot of these tools is critical, right? So challenging and re-asking and verifying is a part of the process in my mind. I don't look at it as ask once, receive response, move on. I really don't look at it that way. I think thinking about it more as a dialogue, you ask again, you refine. Think of those surveys that you take where the survey is trying to make sure you're being honest, right? It asks you the same question in a slightly different way a couple of different times because it's trying to triangulate the way that you're really thinking about it. And that is a bit more of the mentality that I approach these things with. It is not a one-stop shop. It is an iterative application, and you do need to engage with it with that kind of approach. And I do think that helps improve the quality of the output that you get.
Yeah, and I think that for everyone listening, one of the greatest takeaways here spend a couple of revolutions, a couple of cycles of your time and energy and learning how to prompt properly, because that makes all the difference in the not only of how you're asking the question, but the responses you're getting back. Brandon has another question here. What are some systems you guys are putting in place to make it easier to learn AI? Which is a great question. For me personally, it's Reddit, it's YouTube, it's keeping up to date on some of the latest technologies, listening to podcasts. I'm a dork when it comes to that. So I'm absorbing all of this, trying it and playing it in real time. Are you doing the same thing?
Somewhat. I think there are different learning styles for different people, which I'm a big believer in anyway. And I prefer to read than to watch and listen. So I'm not a big YouTuber, but there is an app that I've been trying, which is, I think it's called Cursive. I'll have to check the spelling, but it essentially puts these kind of snippet preloaded learning tracks together for you. So if you don't want to do all that work to go find the content, it's essentially preloading it for you. And then think of it like learning a language, like the Duolingo, where you go in and that's your homework for the day. It's the same kind of idea. The app is preloaded, you have your learning model for the week or the month, and it's just stepping you through it. And I think that, again, finding something that really works for you, that fits with the time commitment that you're willing to give it and the way that you like to learn, is the most important thing. There are a lot of ways to get this content, but that's just another thing I'll throw out that I use that work for me. There are courses, there are big courses on this I've seen where, you can actually take a whole semester worth of course at certain colleges that they're offering on AI if you want to invest that level of time and energy. So there really is the full spectrum here.
Yeah, someone just put in the chat, Cursive IO.
Yeah, I think that might be the correct spelling. Yeah, that's the one.
Great. Well, Emily, it's been a blast, and thank you so much for being open and so insightful and real. It really shows the limits of AI in aviation and what we can do with it. This is just a conversation. We barely scratched the surface in talking about this. There is so many different paths we can go down thinking about how AI can help us in our day-to-day lives, in our business lives, everywhere. So thank you so much. And to our listeners, the future of aviation isn't just about AI versus people. It's AI with people. Let's stay curious, ask better questions, and don't be afraid to experiment. You can connect with Emily on LinkedIn and follow JETAVIVA. Until next time, wishing you all blue skies and an AI-powered horizon.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Have a good day.